Good afternoon and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. The sharp-eyed amongst you may notice I'm not exactly Paul John Dykes. I am indeed Brian Degning. I'm also not JP in disguise with a cap. It's just one of those Fridays. But it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by Jim and Ryan. Jim, how are you this Friday, fella?
Hey, I'm not Paul John Dykes either. Yeah, good.
We should start all correspondence with that. I'm not Paul John Dykes, but might do that with my opinions today as well. Ryan, how are you doing? How are you?
I'm doing good. My emotions are getting toyed with towards the end of this window. So I'm just trying to hold it together and make it to the finish line. So we'll see how we do. See how the Celtic support is doing towards the end of this window. So
yeah, I think there'll be a lot of phone calls to the Samaritans this August.
Just chill, Ryan. Just chill. It'll all work out. Don't worry.
Exactly. That's it.
It'll all work out at the last day of the transfer window. And it
and
does
Robbie
get
Keane comes in. Yeah.
It's a very typical Celtic transfer window. So obviously, like we know, we've not been bombarded with player sales yet. But I suppose first question for you both. We'll start with yourself, Ryan. What would constitute a good window now? So if we get a few players in the last day, a left back, a centre back, another midfielder, would we sit back and say, do you know what, that's enough, that's fine? Are we going to say, do you know what, we should have had them in, we should have them a good pre-season, this isn't good enough? What's your take, Ryan?
First of all, I think one thing that's been good about this window has been a little bit atypical in the sense I think this is the first window where I haven't seen about 50 million let's go sign James McLean posts online. So I think finally him with Rex and him being over the hill, that chatter's all stopped. I think at this point we all say this, I would love to have them in earlier. But if we can at a minimum, and I know we keep on lowering the bar here, address those problem areas that we've had for 2 years now, which is some competition on the left side for Greg Taylor and someone else to, I don't give Scales as much slack as a lot of the sport gives him. I think he's done quite well given the circumstances, but for him to be our first choice going in the Champions League, that's just, that's not the right move. So I just want to see those two positions filled, and then the rest of them are going to be all dependent on incomings and outgoings. So it seems like that Polish midfielder. I've seen some articles, people looking at flight plans coming from LA to Glasgow. I knew little about him. I'm trying not to get dragged into the YouTube clips because we've all been fooled by those in the past. But the goal he scored the other night, that'd be a good addition to the midfield if he is in fact living up to that. So yeah, it's a tricky window, but for me, fill those positions is what I desperately need. Left back and left center back, and then I'll be happy.
So Paul,
Ryan, yes,
you're fashionably late, but you're always welcome. I was just asking our guys what's going to constitute a good transfer window now. Are we going to sit back and be happy to get some signings in, or are we going to reflect and say this has been poor again? So just before I pass to you, Paul, Jim, what's your take?
I think it's all about timing, Brian. You asked the question, is it good enough? No, it's not good enough. Of course it's not good enough. I think it's hopes versus expectations. I think if you've been paying attention for the past 10, 15 years, then don't set your expectations too high and you won't be disappointed. And as Ryan said, you would look to get new signings in before you go to America, bed them in, hit the ground running. And I think the good start to the season on the field has kind of masked what's happening off the field. I think if we'd have started off the way we started last season, poorly on the pitch, get knocked out in the League Cup by Kilmarnock, I think there'd be pitchforks in the car park just now. So I think we've been encouraged by what we've seen on the pitch. 2 good league performances, goals, attacking football, good to watch on the eye. That's just through the quarterfinals of the League Cup. So all good, albeit the standard of the opposition is pretty poor these days, so to put it in context. If we get to the 2nd of September, we don't drop any points, we'll be 5 points clear of our main rivals. We're through to the quarterfinals of the League Cup. So that's kind of good. And then the Champions League becomes the next test. lots of chat online about the board being incompetent and also the board trying to hoard money. I don't think it's hoarding money. I think it's incompetence. I think the whole thing's pretty incompetent. Saw a posting on X the other day, though, if it's true or not, but was it Bruges sold a player for 33 million quid at the start of July and spent 28 million on 5 players by the end of July. So, you know, I think we've heard all the excuses about, you know, players don't want to come because we're not sure if we're in the Champions League, but we're in the Champions League. So you've crossed that off the excuses. You know, it's you know, all the really good players go towards the end of the window, do they? You know, so I just think it's incompetence. I don't think it's good enough. But hey-ho, we're in the kind of league whereby you don't have to be that good to put points on the board. And I think, should we drop any points between now and the transfer window, or we pitchforks in the car park again? Because we would have been looking for stronger than we finished at the cup final. And I think we've, you know, heart out, Schmeichel in and a goalie for the future, and good. Ida, Bernardo replacing themselves, good. And then we look for 3 more starters. And then with the Kyogo and Matt O'Reilly stuff happening, does that mean you need 5 new starters? So it's all a bit chaotic, I think. And another thing I saw on X again, I don't know if it's true or not, that Brendan said something along the lines of, if Matt O'Reilly goes, I'll need to speak to the board. And you think, what? If that was a true quote, you're thinking, if he goes, you're going to speak to the... So I think it's all pretty dysfunctional. I think it's all pretty incompetent. However, not to be Mr. Doom and gloom as I am portrayed to be, the football's good. We're winning games. Long may that continue. Get some people into both of the attack. And if, as I said, if by the 2nd of September we're 5 points clear, as Ryan said, we brought in 2 or 3 players, I think we'll think it's no bad, but it could have been so much better.
Yeah, and you know that's key, Jim. Is it's no bad, but it could have been so much better. I feel like that could be the slogan. Celtic in general, you know, it's no bad, but it could be better, because it's a bit Groundhog Day with us. We always, you know, I remember when Ange came in, it's a big rebuild, and that was done really well. And then she said, right, we need to build on that. Next transfer window wasn't as good. Next summer, then Brendan comes in, we go, right, the transfer window was a disaster. So constantly kind of, as Ryan alluded to at the start, you're downgrading. And
I think on that point, Brian, I mean, I said expectations. So the window we signed Jota and Carter Vickers, the expectations were we'll get 1, and we got 2. And you think, well, actually, you've exceeded our expectations. Well done. Whereas most of the other transfer windows, it's been the other way. Yeah. And this is no different to them.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I was getting to, is the fact that you get to the point where you get used to it, to the point where it becomes normal. Yeah. And that's where, for me, it really annoys me. That's where I go, hold on, that's not good enough to constantly just say, well, it's typical Celtic, because that's the problem. It's becoming typical.
I think also what Ryan said, the word atypical, and I think the whole Matt O'Reilly and now Kyogo makes it quite an atypical transfer window, because all of a sudden we're faced with this potential getting the guts of 50 million quid in.
Yeah.
Pretty late on the window, and we've never had to deal with that before. So that's, you know, brought a different dynamic to it as well.
It certainly does. Paul?
Well, thank you for running the show. Well, I was having a few technical glitches there, Brian. Thank you very much for that. I think whenever there's an issue, I try and look at the roots of the problem, because virtually every time you see an issue, it's because something's not been done way down the line. And I'm going to go back to a few things that have happened. The first one that I've referred to quite a lot gave us an insight into the kind of culture and the lack of ambition within the club in the highest levels, Brian. And I always go back to that comment made by our previous chairman, Ian Bankier, whereby it was a shrug of the shoulders almost. It's great just to participate in Europe. You know, we can't compete with these teams. So there was this insight for a moment of the lack of ambition that existed within the club. And people might say, well, you know what, that was then, this is now. How much of the regime's really changed, Brian? Because if you come into this transfer window just now, and, you know, we're very fickle as football fans, and we can forget some of the trickier moments last season pretty quickly. We weren't miles ahead of anybody in terms of the league title last season. We managed to have a run of games near the end of that campaign where Brendan Rodgers kind of knuckled down, got his core group that he could trust, let's be honest, one really good acquisition in January that did us very, very well to the end of the season. Kuhn has since become a player. And I think that, we were quite marginally ahead of our nearest challengers. So going into this transfer window, we did have to strengthen, because we could have a repeat of that. We could have a repeat of that scenario. And then you look towards the ambition for Europe. So I always take it back to the root, Brian. And if you have no ambitions to do any more than be the domestic top dogs, we'll continually be fed this kind of scenario. And the scenario is that we're not quite sure what your vision is. We're not quite sure if we're going to get the players or the positions filled that Ryan's mentioned. And, those are the positions that I agree with. And they've been a priority for a long time. And we're going to be constantly taking punts. So even some of the new guys that we've been linked to, if we were to lose Matt O'Reilly and Kyogo. Now, Kyogo was worth 73 goals in 3 seasons. Matt O'Reilly from midfield, what was he, 37 goals or assists last season alone. Massive, massive holes to fill in the Celtic side. Looking towards the derby, but also looking towards the Champions League. And who are we actually linked to? Now, Arnie Engels has been linked to us for a while now. He's 20. He's 20 years of age. So there's still some development to be done before you can say, right, he's going to do Matt O'Reilly's job. We've been linked constantly to Luke McCowan. And I've given my view on that. See if you've got 4, 5 top-class midfielders, and he's a guy you bring in as a squad player, and he's helping towards a Scottish quota. Absolutely. But if you bring him in after Matt O'Reilly leaves, wow. The optics are going to be, pitchforks in the car park, as Jim says. I was reading this morning, Diawara, central midfielder, 19. Right, so we're going back to that point of guys that can instantly improve the first 11. So we're going to guys who may be ones for the future. That's the 2 categories, and we tend to go too often into the latter. Austin Trusty, he's the guy that perhaps will be coming in as part of the Mikey Johnson deal from Sheffield United. He's a centre-half who plays on the left-hand side. And we've all heard the names Alvin Sanchez and Matus Bogusz, who's the Polish midfielder that Ryan referenced earlier. How many of them, though, Brian, make an impact in the first team? How many of them improve the first team? And how many of them are good enough for the Champions League? That's a big question, because we're losing 2 guys, potentially, who are good enough for the Champions League.
And what's kind of stark is he said there about their lack of ambition, but it's actually worse than that, because it's a complete lack of a plan. It's that sort of where we are is, I think, and I hate bringing it up, but because the team across the city are so bad at the moment and in such dire straits, Jim alluded to, we're getting away with the prize a wee bit, because it only takes one other club that gets a really good plan in place, and we start to fall behind very quickly. So having all that money in the bank is great, but if you don't have a plan, what you do is you start the emergency stand and panic, and that's more of a concern for me. But in terms of the players coming in, look, we've got 8 games in the Champions League, right? So you've got to be saying we've got to try and win as many of the home games as possible. You can't lose all 8 Champions League games. Not just the fact that it makes you absolutely furious as a fan, it's the fact that the coefficient would get destroyed. So your chances of getting back in easily year upon year become worse.
Yeah.
And then you need to downsize even more, and you spend even less, and then the gap gets bigger. So for the Celtic board, the reason I say ambition, no having a plan is worse than no having ambition, is even if they think we can't compete in Europe, the plan should still be we need to keep making it, and at least making some money in it and keeping this going. Because if you don't do that, you're in real trouble real quickly. So, the amount of money we spend in what we get in is almost irrelevant if there's nothing sort of underpinning it. You've got to have a plan, a strategy in place to get these players in and this ability up and close that gap. Just little incremental increases in quality, whether it be coaching, training facilities, data analysis, scouting. That'll get you a wee bit closer. But if you don't have a plan, you incrementally get further away. And that's a position we simply cannot find ourselves in the next few years.
No, there's some great comments, agreeing and disagreeing, and that's what it's all about. They're coming through, so let's bring them up. I'm going to start off with Doogie Sharp. Welcome to the show, Doogie. You are commenting on the old YouTube. 20 doesn't mean he needs developed. Players mature at different ages. that point doesn't hold weight. It does if he can't make an impact in the starting 11, Dougie. I mean, I'm referencing the chairman's message of our signing strategy. We sign players to make an immediate impact in the starting 11, or we sign players to develop. So if we bring in Arnie Engels, the argument would be, I guess, does he go straight into the starting 11 and does he make a positive impact? If so, then I'll stand corrected. And I wouldn't use it as a general term. But if Matt O'Reilly leaves, the next in line is Paulo Bernardo. Let's be honest. He's going to step into the first team berth. Anybody else we bring in has to then find a jersey. This point here as well, coming through when we signed Matt O'Reilly, the point that I've got here is that Engels is at a... There we go. Mantis Toboggan comes in. Engels is better at 20-year-old than Matt O'Reilly was. I agree with that. But Matt O'Reilly joined the club when we had players like Tommy Rogic and we had Nir Beaton, and these guys were still at a point where they had first-team jerseys. If Matt O'Reilly leaves and we bring in Engels, we don't have that depth within the midfield, Brian. That's the point I'm making. It's
like
right,
my experienced campaigner there, right. Younger guys.
Yeah, you're on a wing and a prayer, and you're hoping that the 20 and the 19-year-olds and the 21-year-olds hit the ground running and make that immediate impact. Ryan, whenever we talk about signings, there's an element of Scottish football and of the Celtic fan base rather, who say, "What are you moaning about? What are you moaning about? We've won a double, we've won all these trophies. You're spoiled. The club know what they're doing." But I think if you peel back a few layers, there is frustrations not just with ourselves. There must be frustrations at Brendan Rodgers' level as well, because if he then needs to go and speak to the board, and we've got a couple of days to do business, unless they're lined up, it's going to be very hard to get a replacement in for Matt O'Reilly or Kyogo.
Yeah, I think where it comes to, and I know there's been a lot of comments as well where that story came out, and I don't even know the criteria for it, that Celtic is the best run club in Britain. I think part of the disconnect is perhaps from the board's perspective, whether this is conscious or subconscious, we could stand still and progress away from this league. The state of Scottish football is regressing. So us standing still, from their eyes, means we continue to do better in this market, in this league. I mean, it goes to show, look at our success over the past 20 years. We're looking more for progression from this team. This is the team this year. We want to see the team to get better players in. We want the players that are here to do better, to move on the ones that are not contributing and progress. And that bar that we can test it against is Europe. And the scary thing for all of us and Celtic supporters is the teams in Europe are progressing at a much faster rate than we are. So how do we bridge that gap? And I think that's the biggest concern I have. And for me, I know this is a weird way to look at it because I don't want to rip this Band-Aid off right now in this discussion, but all the Kyogo talk. And while I do agree with, what was discussed in the pod yesterday, which was, I actually do think that was the plan by new agent, just to drum up some awareness and drum up some business, and whether it will materialize into a move by the end of the window, we'll see. The silver lining for that is we brought in a player at 26 that was first team ready, and we sold him off at a profit at 29 if we do sell him this window. And that hopefully can signal to the board we don't have to necessarily be looking at these 19-year-old DORs who I agree with a lot of the comments there. 20 in one player is different than 20 in another player. Engels has been playing 33, 35 games in the Bundesliga and doing well there. DOR can't even get in a game in the French league. So for me, that's two different areas of development. But that can signal to the board, you're not only going to get a profit by bringing in a $2, $3, $4 million 19-year-old and selling him 3-4 years later at 23 when they're in the prime. You can bring someone who's pretty much in their prime now and still sell them on for a profit. So having said that, no, don't want him to go. But that disconnect for me is, I don't know how we bridge it. I'm sitting here as a Celtic supporter myself, just thinking in my head, how do you bridge that gap where to be successful in the Scottish League means you just got to stay the course. But that doesn't get the Celtic supporters what they want, which is progression in Europe.
No, I agree with that. And now I'm going to come to Jim on the point that you've made in relation to the fact that often people might say, what are you moaning about? You're spending millions of pounds. You've just spent the best part of £10 million on a striker, Jim. But going back to what Ryan says, it comes back to ambition, doesn't it? And I mean, my ambition as a Celtic supporter is to progress in Europe. Now, what does that mean? Well, it would be good to get to the knockout stage this year, because obviously it's opened up. It's opened up to 24 teams in our group. Therefore, there's a much greater chance. And as the tagline says, will we be prepared for that if the likes of O'Reilly and Kyogo leave? Because if we're not, then it could be, rinse and repeat, and we'll have the same discussion, same time next pre-season, Jim. What is progression for you as a Celtic fan?
I'm going to use that word atypical again. That's my new favourite word since Ryan raised it at the start there. I think the Matt O'Reilly scenario is something that we'd like to see as typical moving forward, that we buy a guy, not a lot of money, and sell him for oodles of cash. Kyogo's atypical, I think, in terms of, if you've asked any Celtic fan, that Kyogo could be here for 3 or 4 years and then he'll leave for a couple of million. To get 18 or whatever number it is, to sort of multiply your... What did we buy him for, Paul? Was it 4.5 or something? To get
4.5. Yeah.
To get 4 times that for a guy at 29, I think it's atypical. The big thing that's changed since I was on last was that our main rivals are not going to be in the Champions League this year, because that's going to make life harder for them. And my big concern is that our club become complacent at that, because they're going to struggle to bring in players. They're going to have to sell some of the better players. Ipso facto, that becomes a bit easier for us. And this idea of, as long as we're better than them, that will do. Which I think is how some of the people at the club believe. Europe, to answer the question, you've said no is the answer to that. We're not prepared. We're miles off being prepared. We're actually miles off being prepared for the Scottish League, I think. And without repeating myself, the first question that Brian posed was the fact that I think we're incompetent because we don't have a stronger squad than we had at the cup final. And although that kind of meets my expectations because they weren't very high to start off with, for me, we're signing too many young players. I don't have the comments switched on, so I don't know what's getting said about signing 20-year-old players. But for me, we need to sign more 27, 28-year-old players who have got that experience in Europe, who can help the team get through, or even the Aaron Moy players in their early 30s who are still international players. That's what gets you through in Europe. Point I made before about some of the signings last year. We go to Feyenoord and we give Laga Bielka his first ever game in Europe. He gets sent off. Odom Home comes on, does the same thing. I don't blame the players, I don't blame the manager. I blame the club for being incompetent in signing those players, when in fact we should have signed a couple of players who have played in the Champions League. And it doesn't cost a fortune, before people jump in the comments. Depending on who you're signing. Guys in Copenhagen, or Polish guys, or Romanian, or Hungarian, or Swiss people who've played Champions League football for their clubs. They're there. They don't have to cost a fortune. And if it's the fact that we don't appear to be shopping in those markets, it appears to be that we don't have a recruitment team. It appears that the manager is now doing the recruiting. As I said last week, he'll soon be making the meals at Lennoxton soon, if this goes on in multitasking. And he's shopping from a market that he knows, and it's an inflated market. And we're paying a lot of money if we go down that road. And we're just incompetent. To answer the question, no, we're not prepared for the Champions League.
Before we get back into it, Brian, I just want to take a sidestep for a second. Matt O'Reilly has been on everybody's minds over the pre-season, and yes, he was photographed training today because that's what he does. He just contributes and gets stuck in until such times as the matter will change. But we actually got on YouTube a message from Matt's gran last night. The comment was on YouTube, and she said, "Thanks to you, all the nice words about Matt for the last couple of years that have been really warming my heart." It sounds as though this is a goodbye message, I'm afraid. "If Matt leaves Celtic in this window, I will miss you both very much." That was me and JP, but I'm pretty sure Brian, Jim and Ryan are part of that as well. As you often say about Matt, that he is special. I think that you are as well. So there you go. There's a big shout out to the Acsom community. Thanks for all the podcasts. Take care. And that's Matt's granny over in Denmark. That blows my mind. That absolutely blows my mind. And we know that it's genuine, right? We've had it confirmed as being genuine. But when I was reading it last night, I was kind of thinking it was confirmation if we needed it, that Matt O'Reilly won't be a Celtic player come the 1st of September. I truly believe, Brian, that Bernardo will step into that berth. I know he's not the same type of player. And if we bring in someone else, be that Engels or maybe someone whose name's not been mentioned yet, they will be developed under Brendan Rodgers' watchful eye to progress into the Celtic first team. I don't think that player is already at the club. I don't think it's Odin Holm. I don't think it's Tomoki Iwata. I think it's somebody else who will come in. So for me, I'm already resigned to the fact that Bernardo is the guy who's going to take the jersey. We might have to change our dynamic or our style, and whoever else comes in will be the guy on the bench trying to get a first team berth. What's your take on that?
Well, first thing, just 2 comments that I saw there that are absolutely excellent. One was saying Matt's granny's just dumped us by text. That was absolutely brilliant partner. Hello. And I think the other thing you think about is, so in theory, right, so I'm absolutely gutted O'Reilly's going. I said at the start of last season, he'd be last season player of the year. I said he had the biggest ceiling of a player we've had at Celtic for a while. I still believe that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
I said losing O'Reilly is a bigger loss than losing Kyogo. If we lost Kyogo, looks like we might lose Kyogo as well. But I can kind of understand why. The players come, they spend a few years, they develop, they go. I'll accept that if that's the plan. But if that's the plan, you have to have someone ready-made to come and replace that player when they go. That's what I'm talking about, this lack of plan. And that player can't just be another random 20-year-old you hope does well. It's be someone with the same sort of attributes, same type of player, the same dynamics, so that when he steps out, somebody else can come in. Whether that's one of our youth players, which I'd like to see more of, or someone you've bought in and identified. But when you get gaps in the team, clear gaps in the team, like centre-back, probably left-back, probably another winger, to Jim's point, you need to get guys that can do the job now, that can help nourish these younger guys through. So it looked like we were starting out when you get Schmeichel and the younger keeper, you think, oh, good idea. There you go. That looks like a plan. Good Celtic. And then players off the face of the earth. So maybe that was by accident. But, you know, it's all about balance. So on the McCown point, I said before, I wouldn't bother signing him because I don't see what he brings. Like, I think he's a good player, but that's it. I think some of the guys in the B squad must be good enough to play in the Scottish League. Like, I'm sure they'd fit into some teams in the SPFL. Why not bring one of them in for cover? Recruit proper experience where you need it, and then get the younger guys, they learn for the experience and they bring it through. That's what we should do. So selling the players, as frustrating as it is, I can accept it because they're going to go and get insane wealth off the back of it. And if they go to the English Premier League, it's probably the best league in the world. I can understand why they would go. That's fine. No issue with that. The issue is the lack of replacement, the lack of sort of contingency planning. That blows my mind. As I said at the start, we're only a couple of seasons away from disaster because if we don't try and do well in the Champions League, attract players, keep the coefficient up, get in there next year, that model that Celtic are relying on won't exist for long because players aren't going to come to drop into the Conference League or drop into Europa League or maybe not even qualify for Europa League if we can't get into the Champions League. So then your pool shrinks even more and we don't have that sort of outside the box thinking to recruit properly to get us back there. So I know it's a wee bit doom and gloom, but it's just that's where my frustration is. It's not the selling of players, it's the lack of sort of contingency to replace them. And just Matt Scanny, if you're watching, I don't really have Matt O'Reilly jammies. I know that much of a creep. But if you have anything sent to you, feel free to send it to Acsom.
Listen, on your point, Brian, where's the next Kyogo? Who's the next Kyogo? Do we even know? And I've had that discussion with Liam numerous times, who's based in Japan. And we started having a conversation when we signed Kyogo because it was a case of, we know Kokai Mizuno was the last player we signed from the Japanese game, but it was like 16 years before Kyogo entered. Why did we wait that long? Well, it's because Ange had the specialist knowledge of the market and he could pick, let's be honest, out of the 6 players, 4 of them have done pretty well for Celtic. Hatate, Maeda, Kyogo and arguably Iwata as a squad player. The other 2 it hasn't worked out. So not a bad hit rate. But why have we not continued to scout and recruit from that market? Because Ange Postecoglou's not in the build. because that shouldn't stop it, Brian. We should have someone out there. We should have someone every season with half a dozen guys to consider. We might not sign them. There's the 6 best players in the J League every single season if we do wish to strengthen in these areas, because there will be more talent. And the thing is, obviously, markets are untapped only for so long, Brian. And before you know it, they're swamped with people bringing in players. We've even seen, I think, Motherwell and Hearts moving into the Japanese league to bring in players. So that's a frustration for me. Now, we're going to take a wee step away, Jim, to speak to the busiest man in showbiz, which is, of course, yourself. There's a wee ticker tape underneath the video. You'll see it there. And if you know the history, and it's live in Glasgow, this is Jim's latest play. Now, Jim, we met up, yourself, me, Jerry, and the one and only Matt Costello earlier this week for a discussion about Matt's career, your new show, and it's going to go live at 6 o'clock tonight on YouTube. Here's your chance for a wee plug. Give us it.
Before that, I think the most encouraging thing is you haven't heard from Kyogo's granny. So, and even if you had, you couldn't understand what it said, I suppose. So, yes, and if you know history is on, in 7 weeks' time in Webster's Theatre, it's a story of being a Celtic fan in the years before the takeover. The Celtic Daz, I think we're called, although I'm not exactly sure what the definition of a Celtic Daz is. Did you have to be a Celtic Da back in the late 80s, early 90s, of which you guys are disqualified? I'm okay. Or do you have to be a Celtic Da? How old did you have to be at the time?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a comedy. Again, if you've seen Benedict Bratback or Benedict Bertie, you can know what to expect. So that's on 8th to the 10th of October in the Websters. Celtic aren't playing that weekend. It's an international break. So if you want your Celtic fix, that's where you go. Yeah, we did that. This is Acsom a couple of days ago. Matt Costello, brilliant actor, brilliant guy, and Jerry Taylor. Matt's got lots of very interesting stories to tell, kind of bonkers stories to tell, really. So it's quite strange doing this as Acsom, whereas kind of today I can sit on the couch and just kind of I'm concentrating, whereas I'm sitting in this kind of more interactive, kind of conversational kind of thing. I had to kind of pay attention to what's happening, and I'm sitting beside. Had to be on it, so I had to pay attention. And I'm sitting beside Matt, so I think I'm like a nodding dog. So I need to watch that to see how it goes. But yeah. And if you know the history, starring Matt Costello, Jerry Taylor, comedy at a time when most of those years we were crying. So you won't be crying, you'll be laughing because it's a comedy, and all the main things are in there. If it's about so. Anyway, thank you for the plug. Coming soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Tickets are on the link underneath this video. Matt Costello tells stories as wide-ranging as Wonder Woman, The Waltons, and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
It's just when he says out the blue, I was speaking to the Waltons, and you think, what? Sorry, what do you mean? You were speaking to the Waltons? Aye, John Boy, and
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth is on the swing, no, the seesaw.
Yeah, honestly.
What?
Celtic discussions can take some unusual twists, and this one certainly did. But
Acsom mug,
you might know him as Stevie the Bookie. Absolutely, Stevie the Bookie. Yeah, he's the guy. Still game. Famous forevermore. People will shout at him in the street and across garage forecourts for the rest of his life, and he's all right with that. Here we go. Let's get some of your comments in. What are you thinking about this transfer window? Let's have a wee look ahead to the St Mirren game as well, shall we? Paul Bosas reckons I'm correct. That's good to have one person agreeing with Paul. Bankier attitude still prevails. That really frightens me to a degree, because anybody I ever speak to who maybe not even be on the board, but in and around that level, speaks a different language to us. They do. They speak a different language to us, Ryan. And I think that obviously you're over in the States, you know the global reach and appeal of this football club. It's frustrating that they are in a wee bubble and they think that anybody that tries to speak a different language is troublesome. We're troublemakers. We're entitled. We're spoiled. That's the kind of view that I think they have of us when we complain.
Yeah, and I think for me, it goes back to my point before, which is from a certain perspective, you can see the club progressing. But from the global perspective, when you benchmark it against the rest of the world of football, we're not. And that's the biggest concern we have. That's why for me, especially with them coming over to the States, it was fantastic to see us, granted preseason, granted against not full strength sides, to see us do well against the likes of Chelsea and Man City, because it showed that we could potentially do that with the right team, with the right players, gelling at the right time. We can go toe to toe with who we want. That's what I want to have back with the Champions League. I miss the days of Martin O'Neill where maybe we weren't progressing through the Champions League every single time, but Celtic Park was a fortress. The likes of Bayern Munich, the likes of Juventus, the likes of whoever came there, and you just felt we can get results. And now, I mean, the second the Champions League song comes on, it's squeaky bum time already for me. And I just knowing this, it's the same story every single time. We concede a goal, and then I say, okay, we're going to concede another one in the next 5 minutes. And it's just because of the mentality and the quality of those players. But so it's troublesome because I don't know what gets us through it. I don't know if the board is playing a very risky game where Brendan has identified some pretty lofty targets, and they're sitting there going and saying, hey, we don't have a scouting system right now. These are our targets. We're going to wait until the end of the window and hopefully snag some at the cheapest price that we can. But I don't know what the answer is, because at the end of the day, we are always going to be anchored to Scottish football. And with the way that the rest of the clubs in this system are run, it just makes Celtic look better and better and better every single year. And even I know it's not 100% Celtic related. There was a story that I saw on BBC recently where the SFA did their own analysis and concluded that Scottish football is miles behind other comparable size associations in terms of youth development, and started pointing fingers at the clubs. Isn't that their job to set the rules and the standards and the systems? That they one of the conclusions is the gap between the U18s and the first team is too big. Are you the ones that got rid of the reserve league? It was a bunch of creating a fire and then pointing over and said someone created that fire, someone needs to put it out. And so that's, again, to anchor this all back into Celtic, that's the league that we're playing in. As much as I'm the biggest opposer to the notion, maybe the answer is for Celtic to finally progress to do something like the breakout European leagues that they're talking about. I don't know. I don't know what that answer is.
The big thing for me, you brought it up. For me, if someone goes into that organisation, the SFA, and they are, free thinking and creative, they won't last, Brian. We've used the example on here before. Brian McClare doesn't last in an environment like that. Celtic, I feel, are the same. If it's an internal promotion to CEO, then everything can tick along nicely. If you bring in an outsider and put them into that position, it won't last. And it's been proven, Brian. Dom Mackay, no one knows the full story. We probably never will, to be honest. But it sounded to me as though he rocked the boat. He had the audacity to have some free-thinking ideas and a bit of creativity. And no, we can't be doing that. Ambition, what's that? So the minute someone like that comes into an environment and a culture, they stand out like a sore thumb and they don't last long, Brian. We should have the best CEO who has a track record of success at other similarly sized organisations coming to our football club, not just an internal promotion.
Or bigger.
Or bigger. Aye. Headhunt them, Jim. Absolutely.
Captains of industry, because they're out there. Big Celtic fans as well. They're out there.
Yeah, you get 100% right. And you bring them into the organisation and make it better, Brian. Show some ambition.
It's easier to say, they've no ambition, they've no plan, they've no strategy. It could be the Celtic board, it could be the SFA, it could be the SPFL. It's the same problem, right? It's just none forward thinking. And to your point, it's the point I've sort of made ad nauseum, is the fact that there's no reason we can't get the best staff in the best positions, whether that be coaching, accountants, data analysis, scouts. We can never compete with Man City pre-season friendlies aside on the park. We can never sign those players, we never pay those wages. But why can we not get the same level of set piece coach or fitness gurus or any of these guys in? Why not, spend a chunk of money on that and try and develop the guys that are at the club, and then just put 3 or 4 experienced players in to tide that over? There's all these things, and it's the same with Scottish football at whole. Just instead of having 4 leagues of 12, 10, 10 and 10, just combine the leagues, move it to summer football, get a new sponsorship deal. Allow younger players to because the reason clubs are all self-serving, right? And I suppose rightly so. But if you're Livingston did it for years, right? They couldn't play young guys because they were so scared they get relegated. because that's about absolute financial meltdown. So they'll try and do anything they can to survive, which is so they don't develop young guys and give them the chance to play expansive football and play younger players. It's not just a Livingston problem; it's a Scottish football problem. So you need to kind of think radically. Why don't we try to strike out a deal with Amazon instead of Sky and get Amazon to put every game on available? Put it on during the summer where you might get an audience that even watch it because there's no other football on. Just try different things. Just try it, and if it doesn't work, you're not going to be any worse off. But I feel Celtic the same. That, to your point, Paul, and when you look at Don Mackay, there's that phrase. It's you can never change a toxic workplace, but a toxic workplace will change you. And you can feel like the reason we insulate people at Celtic is because it's like this is how we're doing stuff. This is how it's always been done. This is how it always works. So this is how we're going to do it. You fit the mould or you don't. The real question for me is where Rodgers is fitting in this time. Because I don't think he can go without accountability either. Because he said he's taken over recruitment and we've had a relatively bad window. So either he's in charge of it and someone's not helping him, but he's not really in charge of it. We need to get some answers because ultimately it's never just one person's fault. It's a collective. Success is collective and so is failure. And they need to identify exactly where it is and try and think somewhere, as I say, something outside the box.
Yeah.
But the point is, Brian, he shouldn't be in charge of it. You're asking somebody to do a job. You're asking somebody to do a job that they're not skilled in doing. His skill is over there somewhere, and he's very, very good at that.
Yeah.
Surely that's incumbent on him as well to say, no, get somebody in that can do it. Surely
but if they're incompetent and they can't get somebody in, he's thinking, well, I'll just do it for now then. But then their expectation should be that it won't be very good because he's not skilled at doing that. This is the point I made about he'll be making the meals next.
Why don't we
I'll do it.
Why don't we have a head of recruitment?
They're incompetent, that's why. And also the fact that the one word that sums the whole thing up is culture. We talked about back when you started the bulletins and Neil Lennon, it was unraveling with the COVID season. He said, "You need to change the culture in here." And we had a big debate about that lasted forever. About you talking about, well, you can't just snap a thing and change the culture. That takes a long time. It's ingrained. And I think we've got that kind of culture that, for all that, without trying to repeat everything that we've all just said there, that we aren't doing all these things we should be doing. And we don't like change and we don't like new people. And we don't like all this kind of stuff. So until that changes, if this is still on in 5 years' time, we'll be having the same discussion in 5 years' time. And the point Ryan made about Celtic are viewed as the best run club in the UK depends what you define by best run club. Mm-hmm. If it's in terms of making money, hands down, we're the best run club in the UK. If it's about being successful at football, no one know it. And that's down to the culture again. Mm-hmm. And the culture leads to the incompetence ad infinitum. And didn't mean to sound too doom and gloom today, but this is the way the kind of conversation is kind of going, looking for, as you said, Paul, go back to the root cause of why things aren't happening, why we are where we are. Yeah. And it always goes back to that. And that's why I said at the very start of the podcast, I think what's happening on the pitch is masking what's happening off the pitch. If we were to lose next Sunday, or drop points next Sunday, pitchforks in the car park, you've had all summer to do this.
Yeah.
You've had all summer to do this, and you've not done it. And then the manager's having to step forward, hats off to him, and take responsibility, because if he did what you said, Paul, well, it's not my job, somebody else is that, it'd be worse. So at least he's trying to get involved and trying to do something. But again, back to expectations, then you're thinking, well, I don't expect him to do, because where he's shopping is the market he knows. He doesn't know the best players in Poland, and Hungary, Romania, and he doesn't know that, and therefore we'll end up with the guy for Burnley or Sheffield United or whatever.
The thing is, it can't be the case that they say, like, I don't think you can say Brendan is smart enough to know he's not good enough at that job, right? So if they've said to him, like, we're not going to do it, and he said, right, I'll just need to do it, or I'll have to take it. Whether that's appropriate or not, and I agree with you, it's not, he's still taking responsibility for it. He's still saying, whether he's qualified to do it or not, he should know he's not qualified to do it.
No, but my point would be that if you put Kasper Schmeichel up front and he doesn't play well, who do you blame? You don't blame Kasper Schmeichel because somebody's asked him to do it. That's my point.
It goes further as well. Who is Celtic's spokesperson right now? Right, so there's been a few different issues. The first one being the ticket allocation. Who came out for Celtic and actually put everybody right and said, no, this is the narrative. Stop skewing it. the manager of the football team. Who's had to grab recruitment by the scruff of the neck and run with it? The manager of the football team, the coach. And I think that's the big issue. And that must come to a point as well with Brendan Rodgers, where he thinks, actually, I just want to be working with my players on the training pitch, progressing them as individuals and developing the team and making sure my shape's right for the weekend. Yeah, I'm dealing with, obviously, he needs to deal with press conferences anyway, but I sometimes feel as though we've got an absent landlord that we continually talk about, but we've got a CEO who doesn't speak, Brian. And by the way, there's a balance there. You don't want to be the football club that is constantly releasing statements and the CEO to be almost like thinking he's the guy, he's the main face of it. But there are certain occasions where you'd hope that he would speak and maybe engage from time to time, not just with the media, but also with the fan base. That doesn't seem to happen, and it's not going to change by the looks of it, Brian. And I think that shows a lack of leadership, not to come out and actually engage with the fans or the media with the big things that, you know what, Brendan Rodgers shouldn't be getting asked about ticket allocations. But they'll ask him because Celtic haven't made a comment about it at that stage.
It's always about communication. Most of the time. I think we said before, like, if Celtic's plan, say, just buying a Sky for this transfer window was going, do you know what, we're not going to sign a left back because you're Matthew Anderson, you think he can do it, he's backup, right? For example, if we communicated that and says, look, this is a new strategy, we're to get a couple of players in, but we really need to focus on the academy now to get these guys in. Might not like it, but at least you would go, right, there's a plan, there's something there. So communication is always really important with that. Like, you know, and we saw it before, someone mentioned Neil Lennon earlier, when it was the Dubai disaster. Yeah. And he was the one that was put out, and he obviously never handled it well, but
hung it to dry, Brian, wasn't it?
Hung it to dry, and then Peter Law done the video statement contradicting him, basically.
Answering his own questions.
Answering his own questions and thrown under the bus. And do you know what? See if there was a Peter Law video with him answering his own questions, I wouldn't mind it as long as he could be like, hi, how you doing, Peter? I'm great, Peter, how are you? I would find that quite good. Like, all right, a bit meta, at least they're getting it. But look, it's these things, it's the simple things. Plans, communication, strategy, having a conversation, having a bit of clarity. Like, we don't have, what else things changes, a lot of football clubs, you can see the structure.
Yeah.
So you go to club's website, you can see, like, you know, CEO, head of recruitment, head of sports science, blah, 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 who reports onto them, you know, that sort of structural chart, when the manager and the coaching staff fit in. Most organisations have that, the organisational chart. Celtic, you can't. You don't really know who's going to do what, other than Daniel Day's pathway manager. What does that look like? Who does he report into?
You're right. Jim and I spoke about Joe Dudgeon, Jim, and we were learning things we never knew, and he was away by this point. He had been and gone. A lot of fans said to me, the first time I heard his name is when he actually left the building. So you're right.
I think we like any other football fans, we don't actually know the whole story. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, nor should we actually know all this kind of stuff. So we're going at this from the position of we're just kind of guessing what's going to happen. We could be completely wrong, a lot of the stuff that we're saying. But the fact that we haven't got players in, the fact that they make excuses about, you know, it's difficult in this window in the Champions League and all this kind of stuff, is the fact other teams are doing it, comparable sizes of teams, even less than us, are doing it to make a fifth to the Champions League, and we don't do it. So it's somebody's fault somewhere. And I've got a sympathy with the manager because he's been asked to do something he's not skilled to do, and his own job must be suffering then. And he must be terribly frustrated at the whole thing, because if I'm a manager, I don't want to get involved in the finances. I want that player there. And I think that's what's happened with Adam Ida. He said, that's the guy I want. And to be fair, we went and got the guy. And as somebody who's at media conference, I can confirm we did get the guy. How surreal was that, going to a media conference with Adam Ida? Anyway.
How come you're always the last guy to ask the questions, Jim?
Well, no, I mean, I'm kind of sitting at lunchtime, whatever it was last Thursday, mind my own business, and then text comes through from that guy Dykes to say, Adam Ida press conference a couple of hours, what you doing? Gonna go? Aye, all right. So you head off to Celtic Park, and I did Nicholas Coons. By the way,
that's the kind of notice we get for these things at times.
Aye, so you can head off to Celtic Park. That's quite surreal that you're there. And how it works, basically, the mainstream media, they ask all the right questions, all the questions you'd expect. I mean, we're sitting here, if Adam Ida came on, you say, what would you ask him? We'd ask him all these typical questions, and then there's the written press, and then there's photographs, and then fan media comes, and it's like 6 of us sitting there, and I'm at the end. So everyone's asked all the questions when it gets to you at the end, and I'm thinking, well, and you're not expecting big answers from the guys. Look, I'm glad to be back. I'll fight for my place, da-di-da. So I became a few fanboy, a fan old man, basically, and just started saying what he'd done last season. So I haven't heard it, so I don't know how bizarre it sounds, but I was just saying, look, well, every Celtic fan dreams of playing for Celtic. You did it last season. Every Celtic fan dreams of scoring for Celtic. You did it 9 times. Every Celtic fan dreamed of scoring last-minute winners. You achieved that 3 times last season. Every Celtic fan dreams of scoring the cup-winning goal. You did that last season. Every Celtic fan dreams of scoring the cup-winning goal against their main rivals. You did that last season. Every Celtic fan dreams of scoring the cup-winning goal against Mirren in the last minute. You did all that in 4 months. What have we got to look forward to? We've got you for 5 years now. So it's real kind of fanboy stuff. But I thought, well, everyone else has asked the obvious questions. And he's sitting 3 feet away. Quite surreal. But that's the opportunities you get when you're involved in the Acsom family, Ryan. So that'll be coming to you soon.
Yeah.
There's the American side, and he'll be getting you off to talk to this guy.
Yeah, there you go.
By the way, you could have been our American correspondent when we came over to this. But I thought, the Adamida thing, you're right. I think the gaffer said, he's the guy I want. And if we're going to spend a couple of million more than we want to, he's the guy I want.
I think also, given what's happened with Kyogo, the chances are they could have maybe known in the background. We're not actually spending $8.5 million for a second choice striker. That's our first choice striker. Because we were all saying at the time, would you spend that amount of money for a second choice striker? And what may transpire is, no, we didn't do that. We actually paid that for the first choice striker.
And by that same account, I think that we're buying Paulo Bernardo as a first team player. I don't think he's a Matt replacement per se, because he's a different type of player. But I do think he's going to get the jersey. By the way, this is what happens. We can talk about Catherine Zeta-Jones. We can talk about Stevie the Bookie. And then Batman comes on to say, I'm Batman, painting the Batmobile green and white. This is Acsom. This is the world of Acsom. These things can take you by surprise. Thomas Burns, good point. We are doing quite well with getting our fringe players out. I compiled a list of 20. And it would appear that the latest one, and I'm going to come to Brian here, because for as long as you've been on Acsom, we've been talking about this fella. Mikey Johnston might actually be leaving the building, Brian. This is, in actual fact, his 8th season in a Celtic jersey. But he obviously did very well when he went to West Bromwich Albion last season, 20 games. He was prolific. And he has come to the attention of a number of clubs down there. Sheffield United seemed favourites to sign him. And it is time for Mikey to go, isn't it? You wish him well, he moves on, and you hope that he can do well in the future. But it's time for Mikey to go. And I think that we have done well at moving players on in this pre-season, but we had to, because we had a big bloated squad. And the guys that have gone out, none of whom I think we will miss, probably cost in the region of 150 to 200 grand a week in wages. That's astonishing.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's kind of funny to think we might not have discussions about Mikey Johnston anymore. It's a bit surreal. It's actually
we should still do it. There should still be a Mikey Johnston day.
I was going to say we should really have a wee bit. I see it's surreal enough having Batman on the podcast, but not having a conversation with Mikey Johnston somehow feels a bit weird though. So we can maybe get a Burnley watch if he goes there, or Sheffield United, or wherever he goes. But look, I think it's been good to clear the decks. It's been much needed, and there's still work to do. There's still guys that are only going to compete. And what I'm really interested in is how we handle the loan signings. There are guys like I mentioned them earlier, but young Anderson going, Boyd Donovan, the other fullback, like good pre-season. These guys, it'd be interesting to see not as much if they go on loan, because they probably will, but where they go on loan. I'm always kind of fascinated by that, because I've had many arguments with people on this podcast about this before, but I don't really think loans in Scotland are that successful. I think they need to go to somewhere where the football's a bit better. Like, actually, mentioning Mikey Johnston done a really good when he went to Portugal, as well as West Brom.
Yeah.
So think outside the box in terms of that. I know we've got the deal with the Austrian club, but I think they're second division. So that would be interesting to see if we change our thinking in terms of where we loan these guys to. Because I know Olayemi's went to Dunfermline.
Yes.
might be slightly different for keepers because they're kept active, but I would have preferred, maybe a championship club in England or somewhere abroad, just to sort of. Cause I always think that you want a loan not only to develop the player's ability but their character a wee bit as well. And sending these young guys to a foreign country, different culture, different climate, seeing how they do, I think it's a good test of character. And
sending them to Fife is going to be an experience.
Aye. Yeah, that's an experience in itself.
Once he learns the language, obviously. So
yeah, once you get over that wee barrier, you'll be fine.
They could send them to the City Discovery and discover it's crap. They went to Dundee, but I think no offence sending to Dundee, but I think I'd like to see where these guys go, and hopefully that pathway, as we spoke about earlier, is actually in play in the next couple of years.
We seem to be doing business with Dunfermline because, remember Ewan O2, the young left back, he went there initially on loan and then he signed permanently. Ben Summers spent some time last season, and now Toby, and Toby's another one, Brian, we've been talking about him for about 4 or 5 years now. Signed him from Spurs, highly rated. This is his 3rd loan deal. It's now or never for Toby Owulayemi at Dunfermline. I think he needs to get game time, and by that time he'll be 22, and it's time for him to be a first-team footballer. If it's not at Celtic, it will be elsewhere. But I do think we've cleared the decks. Obviously, some of them are out on loan. There hasn't been an announcement on James McCarthy leaving the club, but I think I said earlier it fell through the Scott Bain has signed a new deal filter, so it's happened, but they're not going to tell us it's happened. Let's talk about St Mirren at the weekend then, because they are obviously experienced, Ryan. They're experiencing what Celtic did back in the day, where you're playing a lot of games early in the season because they had the European qualifiers, and although they did pretty well, 4 games in Europe, they've now played 7 competitive games before they face us at the weekend. I've spoken before. I don't like his brand of football, but I think Stephen Robinson does so well at that level. He's done brilliantly with St Mirren 5th last season. It's going to be a tough one. It always is. They always do pretty well against us. But I think, regardless of everything we've said today, we go out there and we get the result. Who do you start up top, though? Do you start with Ida or Maeda? Because Maeda done so well at the weekend, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, is Kyogo still out? Do we know? He's been training?
I'm hoping Rodgers has asked that question today. Along with everything else. If he's out and he's fit, then people will start to add the dots and join the dots and all the rest of it. But there you go. There's the 3rd option, I guess. 3 options up top.
I think I would like to see Ida start. I think that's a kind of a good game for him to kind of come in. I understand why he was on the bench in the most recent fixture, kind of just coming into the club and making his cameo towards the end of the game. I thought Maeda did great. I do prefer him on the left, but I would be interesting to see if Kyogo does go. Do we have better luck bringing in another striker? Do we have better luck bringing in a left-sided winger? Just because I'm not sure if Palma is that guy to kind of fill that void just yet. But I would like to start Ida. I think it's perfect, like you're saying, where St Mirren have had a run of games. Legs are going to be tired. What a person to kind of come in there and just batter them with it. He has a lot of pace that we don't give him credit for. But yeah, I think he should definitely start up top and keep Maeda on the left, but take him out halfway through the game and prepare him for the big game coming up in a few weeks' time, because I think we all want to see Maeda on the left going up against the greatest right back that's ever lived in the Scottish League, according to that side. And I can just picture him just, sleepless nights, waking up with flashes of his blonde hair, waking up in the middle of the night. So, love to see you to start up top.
Yeah, no matter what happens, Jim, it's going to get the tongues wagging if Kyogo starts or if he's on the bench or indeed he's not in the squad. The discussion will be had. But St Mirren at the weekend, it's away from home, Jim. And I think we've done pretty well. We've played some great stuff so far, but I'm still looking for a big performance from the likes of Rio Atati, for example. He's a guy that I'm looking at this season with Kuhn to have a kind of breakout season. Hopefully he can do that at the weekend.
I agree with Ryan, Ida up front, because one of the most impressive games was Kilmarnock just before the end of the season there. We were outstanding with a big chap up front, Maeda on the left. Yes, that's what I'd go with. And for the same reason as well, went big chap to score a couple of goals before the game the following week, get him into the groove. So, yeah, hopefully that's the way it goes. And hopefully Kyogo isn't injured and stays. So, but yeah, either up front.
Yeah, Kyogo hopefully is not injured and stays. Brian, what's your take on it? We've got a few options up top now. That could all change in the next eight days or so. But how do you deal with it against St Mirren away from home?
Schmeichel up front. Sorry,
Schmeichel up front. Yeah. Didn't his dad used to go up for corners though? I'm sure he did. He was one of the guys. Yeah, he did. Yeah. So Brian, how do you play it? How do you play it the weekend?
Yeah, I have to agree with you guys. Actually, Ida up front, Maida wide. I think Maida benefits for Ida up front because when he holds it up, Maida can win as a second striker. So I always think that works. I'd be tempted to start Bernardo over O'Reilly because obviously the clubs will kind of know O'Reilly's probably off at this stage, although he's still in the building. So I'd give Bernardo the game because he's likely to start against Rangers next week. So other than that, I think it's the only change we can make because we've not signed enough players to have a squad we can rotate. So yeah, I'd imagine Ida up front. Even if Q was fit and ready and isn't going anywhere, I still start Ida and Bernardo in midfield for Big Matt.
Yeah, I mean the other thing yesterday, JP and I were on talking about being so gutted if O'Reilly leaves, being gutted if Kyogo leaves. Sometimes the box office, the marquee signing, Brian, can work. So obviously we've been talking about the reveal video for Odsonne Edouard, which involves the second coming, the second Stone Roses album, and perhaps at the Brazen Head with Jota in double denim. So that's about the only thing that is going to appease the fans. Who's the Snitch comes in, just to remind us, Mrs. Snitch came from Fife, couldn't wait to get out. It's not that bad. Come on, it's not that bad, is it, guys? Right, thanks everybody for getting involved. 1,400 strong, and thank you every single one of you for buying a ticket to come and see Charlie Mulgrew and Paddy Mullane next month at Gracie's. Completely sold out, cannot wait for that. So if you still want a ticket for some kind of live action, buy one for Jim's show. Ticket is under the video. Thanks to Jim Orr, Brian Degnan and Ryan Pearce for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.